My husband cheated with my best friend, so I ruined their perfect life. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon for upcoming more interesting videos.
My name is Natalie Brooks. I am 29 years old and I live in Denver, Colorado. And until about a year ago, I truly believed I had the kind of life people dream about. I had a husband I loved, a small, cozy house in a quiet neighborhood, and a best friend who felt more like a sister than anything else. My husband Ethan and I met almost 7 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party, and from the beginning, everything between us felt easy. He was charming, confident, and always knew how to make people laugh, while I was more organized and careful, the kind of person who planned everything, from grocery lists to weekend trips. Somehow, our personalities balanced each other perfectly, and after 4 years of dating, we got married in a simple but beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family. When I think back to those early years, I remember a lot of laughter, long drives through the mountains near Denver, and quiet nights on the couch watching movies while snow fell outside the window. It felt safe and predictable in the best possible way. The other important person in my life was my best friend, Lily. I met Lily during my second year of college when we were both assigned to the same marketing project. She was outgoing, bold, and the kind of person who could walk into any room and instantly make everyone feel comfortable. Within a few months, we were inseparable. We studied together, shared late-night snacks during exam weeks, and spent hours talking about our future dreams. After graduation, we both stayed in Colorado, and even though our careers took different paths, we remained just as close. When I started dating Ethan, Lily quickly became part of our lives too. She was there during our engagement celebrations, helped me pick my wedding dress, and even stood beside me as my maid of honor at the ceremony. Over the years, she became such a constant presence in our home that it almost felt natural for her to drop by without warning sometimes, bringing takeout food or a bottle of wine for a casual dinner. I trusted her completely, and Ethan seemed to get along with her just as easily. They would joke around, tease each other, and sometimes team up against me during board games, which always made the evenings feel fun and relaxed. Looking back now, those memories feel strange because at the time, nothing seemed unusual at all. It was simply our normal life. Three people who cared about each other, spending time together like family. But over time, small things started happening that I barely noticed at first. Lily and Ethan began texting more often about random things like funny videos or plans for group dinners. Sometimes they shared inside jokes that I did not fully understand, but I assumed it was harmless since they spent so much time around each other anyway. There were also moments when I walked into a room and the conversation suddenly shifted, or the laughter stopped for a second before starting again. I remember asking once what they were talking about, and Ethan quickly said it was just a silly meme Lily sent him. I laughed it off without thinking twice, because why would I suspect anything between my husband and my best friend? My life felt stable and secure, and I had no reason to question the people I trusted most. One evening, everything began to change. It was a Thursday, and I had planned to stay late at work finishing a report for a new client, but the meeting scheduled for that afternoon was suddenly canceled, so I decided to head home earlier than usual. I remember feeling relieved because it meant I could relax for a few hours before Ethan got back from the gym. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Ethan's car parked outside, which surprised me because he normally stayed out later on gym nights. At first, I thought maybe he had come home early as well. When I walked inside the house, the living room lights were on, and there was a familiar purse sitting on the couch, Lily's purse. I remember smiling slightly, thinking she had probably stopped by to visit, since she often did that without warning. The house felt quiet, though, almost strangely quiet for two people who usually filled the place with conversation and music. I called out a quick hello, but no one answered, so I assumed they were upstairs talking. I kicked off my shoes, placed my bag on the kitchen counter, and started walking toward the staircase. Just as I reached the top step, I heard laughter coming from behind the bedroom door. It sounded like Ethan and Lily were joking about something, and for a brief moment, I even felt happy knowing the two people closest to me were getting along so well. But the moment the wooden floor creaked beneath my foot, the silence suddenly stopped. The silence that followed felt heavy and uncomfortable, like someone had pressed pause on a conversation the second they realized I was nearby. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the closed bedroom door, trying to understand why the atmosphere suddenly felt so strange. My heart began beating a little faster, though I still could not explain why. Slowly, I reached for the handle and pushed the door open. And in that single moment, the life I believed in began to fall apart right in front of me. When I opened the bedroom door that evening, the scene in front of me felt unreal, like something from a nightmare that my mind refused to fully process. Ethan and Lily were standing close together beside the bed, their expressions frozen in shock as if they had been caught doing something they never expected anyone to see. For a moment, none of us said anything. The silence stretched so long that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I remember looking from Ethan to Lily, hoping desperately that there was some explanation that would make sense of what I was seeing. But the tension in the room told me everything I needed to know. Lily quickly stepped back, brushing her hair away from her face while avoiding my eyes, and Ethan started talking immediately, his voice rushing out in a clumsy attempt to explain. He said it was not what it looked like, which only made the situation feel even more absurd because deep down, I already knew exactly what it was. I asked them both one simple question: how long? But neither of them answered right away. Lily stared at the floor while Ethan kept running his hair through his eyes like he was trying to find the right story to tell. Eventually, he admitted that they had been spending more time together recently and that things had become complicated. Hearing that word, complicated, made something inside me snap, because betrayal does not feel complicated when you're the one standing there watching your entire life collapse. I looked at Lily, the person who had stood beside me at my wedding, and asked if she had anything to say, but she only whispered that she never meant for things to happen this way. That sentence echoed in my mind because it sounded like the kind of excuse people make when they know they have crossed a line they can never uncross. The argument that followed felt chaotic and exhausting. I asked them how they could both betray me like this, and instead of giving a clear apology, Ethan began talking about problems in our marriage that I had never realized were so serious. He said we had grown distant over the past year and that he felt like I cared more about work than about him. Lily nodded quietly as if she agreed with everything he was saying, and in that moment, the pain of their betrayal mixed with the shock of hearing them rewrite our entire relationship as if it had always been broken. I tried to remind Ethan of all the years we spent building our life together, but he only repeated that feelings change and that sometimes people fall in love with someone unexpected. The conversation went in circles for what felt like hours, until eventually Lily grabbed her purse and rushed past me without another word, leaving Ethan standing in the middle of the room looking exhausted and defensive. Over the next few days, everything moved quickly and painfully. Ethan packed some of his things and said he needed space to figure out what he wanted. I stayed in the house trying to process everything that had happened, but the silence in the rooms felt heavier with every passing hour. Within a couple of weeks, the truth became impossible to ignore. Ethan had moved into a small apartment across town, and Lily was spending most of her time there with him. Soon, pictures began appearing online, showing the two of them smiling at restaurants and parks as if they had simply started a new chapter without leaving any destruction behind. Some of our mutual friends reacted with shock when they heard the news, But others slowly began repeating a different version of the story, one that suggested my marriage had already been falling apart and that Ethan and Lily had only followed their hearts. Hearing those rumors felt like another layer of betrayal because it meant that somehow I had become the villain in a situation where I was the one who had been hurt the most. Instead of arguing with anyone, I chose to stay quiet and focus on rebuilding my own life. I went to work every day, kept my routine steady, and tried not to let my anger show, even when the memories felt overwhelming. On the outside, I appeared calm and composed, but inside, I was carefully observing everything that was happening around me. Ethan and Lily seemed determined to present their relationship as something perfect and exciting, posting smiling photos and cheerful captions that made it look like they had found happiness together. But the more I watched, the more I noticed small details that did not match the story they were trying to tell. Their smiles sometimes looked forced, their plans seemed rushed, and the energy between them felt strangely fragile, as if they were trying too hard to convince the world that they had made the right choice. And that was the moment I began to realize something important. Everyone else believed I was broken and defeated, but in reality, I had started seeing the cracks in their perfect new life long before anyone else did. In the months after Ethan left, I slowly rebuilt a quiet routine that helped me move forward, even though the memories of betrayal still appeared when I least expected them. I focused on my job, spent more time with coworkers who genuinely supported me, and began rediscovering hobbies that I had ignored during the chaos of the divorce process. From the outside, my life looked calm and stable again. But there was still a small part of me that occasionally checked social media out of curiosity to see what Ethan and Lily were doing together. Their profiles were filled with pictures that made their relationship appear exciting and flawless. Weekend trips, smiling selfies in restaurants, captions about new beginnings and fresh starts. Anyone who did not know the real story would probably assume they were a perfect couple who had found happiness after difficult relationships. At first, those posts hurt because they made it seem like the two of them had simply replaced me and continued living a life that used to belong to all three of us. But over time, something strange began to stand out. The more I looked at those carefully chosen photos, the more I noticed small inconsistencies in the story they were presenting. Through mutual friends, I occasionally heard updates that did not match the image they were showing online. One friend mentioned that Ethan had recently quit the stable job he had while we were married because he wanted to pursue a business idea with a friend. Another person mentioned that he had started borrowing money from people while trying to launch that project because it was not making profit yet. Hearing these details surprised me because Ethan had always relied on the steady routines I created in our life together. I was the one who handled budgets, organized bills, and made sure everything stayed balanced, while he focused on bigger plans that sometimes changed quickly. Without that structure, it seemed like he was beginning to struggle in ways he never expected. Meanwhile, Lily appeared to be adjusting to a version of Ethan she had never seen before. When she and I were friends, she only experienced the charming and relaxed side of him, the version who showed up to dinner parties with jokes and easy smiles. But living with someone every day reveals habits that are harder to hide. According to a mutual acquaintance, Lily had started complaining about Ethan spending money too freely and leaving responsibilities unfinished, small things that slowly turned into larger frustrations. I found it ironic because those were the same habits I used to quietly manage for years. I never made a big deal about them because I believed relationships required patience and teamwork. But now, it seemed those same issues were creating tension between the two people who had once convinced themselves their connection was perfect. The more I heard these small updates, the clearer the situation became. Ethan and Lily's relationship had been built during a moment of excitement, secrecy, and betrayal. But those emotions rarely create a strong foundation for a real partnership. Eventually, ordinary life begins to reveal the truth behind the fantasy. I did not need to interfere or seek revenge because the reality of their choices was slowly unfolding on its own. Still, I continued observing quietly without confronting either of them because I wanted to see where things would lead. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened that changed the situation completely. One evening, while I was relaxing at home after work, my phone buzzed with a message notification. When I looked at the screen, my stomach tightened because the sender's name was Ethan. We had barely spoken since the separation, except for a few necessary conversations about paperwork. Seeing his name appear suddenly felt strange and unsettling. At first, I considered ignoring the message, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened it, the text was short and casual, asking how I had been and saying he hoped life was treating me well. The message seemed harmless on the surface, but something about the timing felt suspicious. After months of silence, he had suddenly decided to reach out again. I responded politely, but briefly, not wanting to reopen old wounds. Yet over the next few days, Ethan continued sending messages, slowly shifting the conversation from casual greetings to complaints about his current life. He mentioned that things were more stressful than he expected, and that relationships could become complicated in ways people never imagine. Reading those words, I realized he was hinting at problems between him and Lily without saying it directly. And in that moment, I understood something important. If Ethan was already reaching out to me while still building a public life with Lily, then the perfect relationship they were showing the world might be far more fragile than anyone realized. And that realization soon presented an opportunity I never expected, an opportunity that could expose the truth behind their carefully crafted story once and for all. After Ethan started messaging me again, I spent several days thinking carefully about how to respond because the situation felt strange and almost ironic. The man who had once walked away from my marriage to start a new life with my best friend was now casually appearing in my messages, complaining about how stressful things had become. Instead of reacting emotionally, I chose to stay calm and neutral in my replies. I answered politely, but never encouraged the conversation too much. Yet Ethan continued writing to me every few days, slowly becoming more open about his frustrations. He mentioned arguments about money, disagreements about responsibilities, and the pressure he felt trying to maintain a life that looked perfect from the outside. As I read his messages, I realized he was revealing things he probably never expected me to see again, pieces of honesty that did not match the happy story he and Lily were still posting online. I decided not to confront him directly. Instead, I simply kept the messages, quietly saving them in case they ever became important. At the same time, another unexpected development happened. Lily reached out to me one afternoon with a message that sounded strangely friendly. She said she knew the past year had been painful for everyone and that maybe it would help if we talked in person to clear the air. Her tone sounded polite, but something about it felt rehearsed, as if she wanted to prove to herself or to others that she was mature enough to handle the situation. I considered ignoring the invitation, but part of me sensed that the truth behind their relationship was already beginning to unravel, and meeting them face to face might reveal even more. So I agreed to see her at a small gathering hosted by mutual friends a week later. The evening of the gathering felt tense from the moment I arrived. Several familiar faces were there, chatting and laughing, but the atmosphere shifted slightly when Ethan and Lily walked into the room together. They stood close to each other, smiling and greeting people as if everything in their lives was completely normal. When Lily noticed me, she approached with a careful smile and thanked me for agreeing to talk. Ethan followed a few steps behind, looking nervous in a way I had never seen before. The three of us eventually ended up sitting at a small table in the corner of the room while conversations continued around us. Lily started the discussion by saying she hoped we could move forward without resentment and that everyone deserved happiness in the end. I listened quietly while she spoke, choosing my words carefully when it was my turn to respond. I told her that happiness built on betrayal rarely stays simple for long, and that the past cannot be erased just because people pretend it never happened. The conversation quickly became uncomfortable. Ethan tried to smooth things over by saying everyone had made mistakes and that life was complicated, but the tension between his words and his nervous body language was obvious. At one point, Lily mentioned how strong their relationship had become over the past months and how they had learned to support each other through difficult times. But as she spoke, Ethan interrupted her to correct a detail about one of their recent plans, which created an awkward pause, because his version of the story did not match what she had just said. The small contradiction might not have meant much to anyone else, but I could see the confusion on Lily's face as she realized Ethan was accidentally exposing cracks in the perfect image they were trying to maintain. As the conversation continued, more little contradictions appeared. Ethan spoke about feeling overwhelmed with responsibilities, while Lily insisted everything had been stable and exciting for them. Both of them were trying to control the narrative, but the truth was slowly slipping out in small moments of honesty. Finally, Ethan turned to me with a hesitant expression and said that sometimes people realize they made choices too quickly and that life has a way of teaching difficult lessons. The comment hung in the air long enough for Lily to understand exactly what he was implying. Her expression hardened as she looked at him, then back at me, sensing that something deeper was happening beneath the surface. I had remained calm throughout the entire evening, listening to their explanations and contradictions, but now there was no reason to stay silent any longer. I slowly reached into my bag and took out my phone, then looked directly at Ethan before speaking. I said that if we were all going to talk honestly, then maybe it was time for everyone to see the full picture. Lily frowned slightly, clearly confused about what I meant, but Ethan's expression changed immediately, his shoulders tightening as if he already knew what was coming. I explained that over the past few weeks, Ethan had been sending me messages talking about how unhappy he had become and how complicated his life felt now. I told them that he often complained about arguments, financial stress, and the pressure of trying to keep everything together while pretending nothing was wrong. Lily turned toward Ethan with disbelief written all over her face, asking him if what I was saying was true. But before he could answer, I unlocked my phone and placed it on the table between us, displaying several of the messages he had sent. The silence that followed felt almost overwhelming. Lily leaned forward, reading the screen slowly, while Ethan looked down, avoiding eye contact as the evidence of his words sat right in front of both of them. One message showed him saying that sometimes he wondered if he had made a mistake leaving our marriage. Another revealed him admitting that things with Lily were not as perfect as they appeared online. Each sentence felt like a crack, spreading through the image they had worked so hard to maintain. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, Lily finally looked up from the phone, her expression filled with anger and disbelief as she demanded an explanation from Ethan. He tried to defend himself, saying he was only confused and that he had reached out to me because he needed someone who understood him. But the more he spoke, the worse the situation became, because every word sounded like another excuse. Lily's voice grew sharper as she reminded him that their entire relationship had started with promises about honesty and trust, promises that now seemed meaningless in the light of those messages. The argument between them quickly escalated, drawing the attention of a few nearby guests who could not help noticing the raised voices and tense body language. I remained seated, quietly, watching everything unfold, because by that point, I understood something important. I did not need to shout or accuse anyone. The truth was already doing the work for me. The perfect relationship they had shown the world was collapsing under the weight of their own choices. Ethan looked increasingly desperate, trying to calm Lily and explain that he still cared about her. But she was no longer listening. The realization that he had been secretly reaching out to the woman he betrayed, while pretending to build a new life with her, was something she could not ignore. Eventually, Lily stood up, pushing her chair back with frustration, and walked away from the table without another word, leaving Ethan sitting there alone, surrounded by the consequences of his own actions. For a brief moment, he looked at me, as if hoping I would say something that might repair the damage, but there was nothing left to say. The chapter of my life that included him had already ended long ago. I quietly stood up, collected my phone, and left the gathering, feeling a strange sense of calm as I stepped outside into the cool evening air. In the months that followed, I heard through mutual friends that Ethan and Lily's relationship had ended not long after that night. The image of happiness they once shared online disappeared, replaced by silence and distance. Meanwhile, my own life continued moving forward in ways I had not expected. I focused on my career, strengthened friendships that truly supported me, and slowly rebuilt my sense of confidence. Looking back now, I realize that the betrayal, which once felt like the worst moment of my life, eventually pushed me toward a stronger and more independent future. I did not ruin their perfect life, because the truth is, it was never perfect to begin with. All I did was reveal the reality they had been trying so hard to hide. And in the end, that reality was powerful enough to destroy the illusion all on its own.